Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graben.
Hi, this is Mark Graben. Welcome to episode 343 of the podcast. It's June 5th, 2019. My guest today is Amanda Mewborn. She is an executive director of project management for Piedmont Health. Well, I've known Amanda through the Society for Health Systems for a while now, and she's one of the very small number of people I know who has both engineering and nursing degrees. Amanda has a BS in Industrial and Systems Engineering and an MS in Health Systems from Georgia Tech, and she also has a BS in Nursing from Georgia State University. So in today's episode, we talk about that very unique and interesting combination of skill sets and why she got a nursing degree. We also talk about her career in healthcare, along with some of the facility design and construction work that she's been involved with. We'll also hear her thoughts on why it's important to have the engagement and involvement of frontline staff and patients in the design process, and we'll talk about a whole lot more. So if you would like to find links to Amanda's profile, information about the Society for Health Systems, and more, you can go to leanblog.org/343. Amanda, hi. Thank you so much for being here on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
But can you start off, introduce yourself, and we'll go backwards from here. But if you can introduce yourself for the audience and what it is that you do today.
Sure. I'm Amanda Mewborn. My background is that I'm an industrial engineer and a registered nurse. I focus mostly on healthcare facility design and construction, but I do some other things too. I have a master's degree in health systems and a bachelor degree in industrial and systems engineering. I got both of those at Georgia Tech, and a bachelor degree in nursing from Georgia State University. I currently work at Piedmont Healthcare. It's a large healthcare system in Georgia, and I work as executive director of project management, where I focus mostly on a big building expansion project that we're doing at our hospital's flagship hospital campus. It's a $452 million project that we're going to open in August of 2020. And I also currently serve as Senior Vice President of Technical Operations for the Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineers.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing that. That's how we've crossed paths, was through, in particular, your involvement in the Society for Health Systems. So thank you for all of the time that you volunteer and commit to that organization.
I definitely enjoy it. There's a lot of great volunteers through SHS, and I've met a lot of great people there. So definitely a great organization.
Yeah. Well, and I was really excited to have the chance. We've talked briefly at the last Society for Health Systems conference, but I think it's fairly rare. I don't know. I think I know just a handful of people with both engineering and nursing degrees. So maybe we can kind of start off and talk about industrial engineering. I'm also an industrial engineer. How did you end up choosing that as your undergraduate degree?
Well, honestly, I was a little tricked into industrial engineering. I originally wanted to major in biomedical engineering, and I had an idea that I wanted to develop prostheses for folks, maybe even some smart prostheses. But my dad was smarter than me, and when I graduated from high school, there was this in-state scholarship program that paid for schools in-state. So Dad said, hey, if you'll go to this in-state school for 1 quarter, and I know they don't have your biomedical engineering program, but if you'll go there 1 quarter, if you don't like it, I'll pay for you to go to this other school. And of course, he was so smart that I went over to Georgia Tech and made a lot of friends. And after 1 quarter, I ended up staying there. And I majored in chemical engineering because that was the closest thing I thought of to biomedical. And as I started to interview for jobs, most of the opportunities were at oil refineries or paper factories, and you worked independently. And I'm an extrovert, and I knew it wasn't the right fit, and went to lunch one day with a sorority sister, Mary Ellen Skeens, somebody else who's really involved in SHS. Right. And she told me all about the IE work she was doing in healthcare, and I thought it was fascinating, and I changed my major to IE and went down the healthcare route. So it's been a perfect fit for me.
Oh, good. And so, I mean, I'd be curious to hear more. I mean, what makes you say that it's a perfect fit? What appeals to you? What you heard about and what you've seen in your career that makes you feel like, yeah, that was a good change, a good choice.
Well, there's a few things. One is in IE, we often work with a lot of other people, and I really like other people and interacting with other people. So that was a good fit. I really like the efficiency side of things and looking for a better way to do things. My mind just kind of works that way. So that was a natural fit. And then applying it to healthcare is really rewarding because we're making a difference in everybody else's lives. Everyone needs healthcare at some point, and there's a lot of opportunity for improving the healthcare system. And I think IEs are the key to making that happen based on the perspective of how an IE thinks. So those are a few of the reasons that I think it's been perfect for me. The thing that appealed to me most when I was speaking with Mary Ellen was the idea of, she was telling me about benchmarking and the idea of comparing different health systems and looking for the best way to do things and continuously improving. And that was kind of the hook that reeled me in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a coincidence. I started off a freshman in college. My initial choice of major was also chemical engineering.
Oh, wow. Why did you pick chemical? Was it similar to mine where you just thought, oh, this is similar?
Well, I didn't really know. My dad, who's an electrical engineer, kind of pushed me lovingly into engineering, and I liked chemistry in high school. Like, I had no deeper understanding or passion for it. But then, I got there and I kind of realized, I think, like you were saying, I'm more interested in people and systems, different types of systems. Like, to me, like organizational systems more so than like vats and tanks and pipes. I think that was what my future in chemical engineering would have been. So I appreciate what you're saying. I feel the same way, that industrial engineering was a perfect fit for me as well.
Interesting. I would have never thought that there was somebody else that had a similar path.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we don't know, and we have to go explore different paths and fields. And so it sounded like, I want to talk more about your continued exploration. So did you get the MS in health systems before the nursing degree, or can you kind of walk us through the sequence of what led to those steps in your further education?
Sure. So after that lunch I had with Mary Ellen, I changed my major to IE. One year ahead of me. And so she was vacating a position that seemed interesting. So I went into that and did that graduate research assistantship and graduated. And after that, I went to work at a local hospital system. I was hired into the decision support department. There was a product at that time called Action, which was a benchmarking type product where you could benchmark with other hospitals. And they hired me to do that and cost accounting type work. I enjoyed that for a short period of time, but pretty much right after I got hired, maybe about a year into working at that hospital, they decided to create a revenue management department. And the purpose was to recoup missing revenues and improve charge capture and work on our managed care contracts and basically do things that we could pull in more revenue. And so I moved over into that and kind of served as the continuous improvement person for revenue cycle, which was a blast. I did that for about 5 years. It was really rewarding because just in the first year alone, we recouped $7.5 million in net revenue that had previously been written off. So it was really, really rewarding. And after a few years, I decided to move on into operations, and that's kind of where I took a turn into nursing.
Yeah, so you were very much on the for people who don't know terms, revenue cycle. That's essentially billing and right.
Yes, exactly. It's the registration of patients, so collecting the insurance information, and it goes through to capturing the charges. So all the things that the patient receives when they receive their care, capturing the charges for that, and then sending the billing off to the insurance company. And then the insurance company has a contract with the hospital for how much they're going to pay for various things. So the insurance company pays the hospital, but sometimes there's discrepancies in that, like maybe a procedure wasn't authorized, or maybe there was some glitch in the system and the payment was incorrect. And so there's a lot of opportunity for making sure that we get the registration correct, we do scheduling up front correct, and get the appropriate authorizations before we do procedures, and then that we collect the correct amount of money for those procedures after the patient receives the services. So it's kind of that whole continuum.
Yeah. And then I guess there's a lot of things that could go wrong in the process through that entire chain that might lead to, as you said, charges being written off instead of being collected.
Exactly. So the billing is really complex. You would think that we would just bill for an appendectomy, for example, but the bill actually isn't just appendectomy. There's thousands of lines of charges for various things. And so when it goes to the insurance company, there's a bunch of codes that get processed, and the contracts, it's hard to process those codes and determine what the correct amount of payment is based on the contracts. And it's mostly automated through a system, but the system's only as good as it's been programmed to do. And so checking those payments, you can find oftentimes a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you switched into operations. So maybe if you can just kind of continue, like what were your next steps and what led then to the nursing path?
Well, after doing that revenue cycle stuff for about 5 years, which I really enjoyed, I saw a lot of opportunity in clinical operations. And specifically, I was seeing things like we were having nurses enter charges and things like that. And I just overall, as working in those environments, I saw opportunities there, and I looked around and I saw that everybody that worked in operations was a nurse. And I thought, well, I can go to nursing school on the side and get all that knowledge that those nurses have so that I can work in operations. And I kind of did that on the side. I did it secretly because I was afraid that I wouldn't like nursing school and I'd drop out and somebody would be disappointed in me. So I went and completed the prerequisites at a local community college, like in the evenings. And after that took me about a year. And after that, I enrolled at Georgia State and showed up for my first nursing class. And again, I was doing this all as a secret. And as luck would have it, the CNO from my hospital was the guest lecturer on my first day of nursing school.
Whoops, busted, right?
Yeah. So after the class, he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" So I've tried to keep my secret by saying that I was just auditing the class, but no one audits nursing classes, and he knew that. So he agreed to keep my little secret, but it ended up not being necessary to be a secret because I ended up loving nursing and, really stuck with it. But while I was in nursing school, I ended up getting an opportunity at another local healthcare system, working more in the service excellence realm and more in operations. And so I changed jobs during nursing school and went to do that job. And when I finished nursing school, I picked up a second job on weekends working as a nurse, which I loved. So it was kind of a curse actually though, because then I was engineer and nurse and I wanted to do both. So I don't recommend it for other people because, if you like both of them, then, you end up with no personal time because you want to do all these things.
Right. So, wow. So you had that sort of dual life, double jobs. Was it, so, I want to explore, I'm really fascinated by like parallels or differences, not just in the jobs, but in, kind of the way of thinking that's taught in engineering school and what might be different in nursing school. But maybe just, first, before you're talking about having that second job, are there stories that come to mind of things that were frustrating working as a nurse, but you still have your engineer mind, things that you saw or things that you couldn't quite? Engineers are driven to improve, right? So I'm curious if there were frustrations or things that jumped out at you actually working as a nurse.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, you can't turn off your engineering brain, just like I can't turn off my nursing brain either. Yeah. And so I'm constantly looking for ways for things to be better. And of course, we all know that one of the types of waste in lean is the waste of skill. So having that background as an engineer, it would be really wasteful for me to not apply it when I'm working as a nurse.
Yeah.
So I constantly saw things like even down to simple things like how the supply room was organized and the layout of the supplies. how the equipment room was laid out. We had this one patient room on this unit that I worked on where we kept all of our equipment. And inevitably, every time I needed a piece of equipment, it was the one in the very back, and I'd have to pull everything else out, to get to the piece of equipment I needed in the back. So just simple tools like 5S and layout, and even what equipment and supplies are there, were opportunities that I saw in the clinical environment. And then there were even process things, like how we got our medications from the pharmacy and the timing of that, and how things were batched. The batching of how rounding happened with the physicians rounding on patients. I saw so many opportunities. And of course, I tried to tackle some of them, but some of them are so systemic and so big. One nurse working one shift isn't, going to make a dent in those. So yes, it did drive me crazy, having that perspective as well.
And I mean, you raised a really good point about the waste of talent, the waste of skill. I mean, unfortunately, this happens far too often in healthcare, where even if a nurse or staff member in whatever area doesn't have an engineering degree, they often see things that are more difficult than they should be. They might have ideas about how to improve, and sometimes they're not engaged or listened or tapped into. So thinking ahead, or I guess as you went into other roles, have you been able to help create an environment where that skill or those ideas for improvement-minded people don't get wasted?
Yes. So my current focus is on facility design and construction. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is having the folks from the front line be engaged in design. I truly believe that the best ideas come from the front line because they live it every day and they have ideas for how to make things better. Oftentimes they're just not empowered to act on those, or they need additional resources to make it happen. So on the project that I'm working on right now, we had more than 1,000 people involved in the design of our building, and 543 of those people were patients. And having that experience from the front line, engaged in how to design the facility and how to set up our workflows and how to make the experience better, I think is going to be incredible. I can't wait to open this building and get feedback and see people enjoying some of the changes that were put in place from the front line. So I think that would probably be the biggest thing is that I do in my current practice is engaging the front line. And then the other thing I strongly believe in is going to the Gemba. So oftentimes people will ask, how something works or what something, is like. And instead of just relying on my own knowledge or, what I saw happen last week, just getting up and going out there and seeing how it's actually happening and talking with the people at the front line, it can really cut out a lot of waste and catapult things forward for making improvements.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying is you're not relying on your past experience as a nurse, which is different than the reality people might be facing today, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, of course, there's so many technological advances and things improving, and even evidence. There's so many research studies and so on out there that practice is constantly changing. And so relying on my own personal knowledge, it might not be exactly what's happening today, and it might not be current practice. So getting out there and finding out what's happening today and what's on the horizon, I think is really important.
Yeah. One other question comes to mind just as a follow-up. You talk about working as a nurse and things that didn't work as well as they could have, things that weren't as easy as they could be, related to supplies and things like that. I've had a couple different conversations recently with people who work in healthcare who are very improvement-minded, and there's this theme, and I've never quite heard it said this way, and I'm curious to get your reaction to it. That in particular, one nurse said, she speaks up, she has ideas, it would be easier, it would be better if we do this. And part of the kind of pushback that she's gotten from her leaders, paraphrasing, is that, well, this is just how nursing is. And the implication is that the nursing has ideas to make the work easier somehow isn't strong enough to deal with nursing. And I find it, like, to me, that's a really foreign mindset. It's just, mean, it's not foreign, it's different. It's a different mindset. And I'm just curious, open-ended question, what your thoughts or reactions are to that.
Well, I kind of think it's like when you ask somebody why they do something the way they do it, and they tell you because it's been done that way for the past 20 years or however long. Nothing that's like nails on a chalkboard for me. I cannot stand that answer. And so I believe it's a culture of continuous improvement. And in order to build that culture, the answer that we've done it this way for 20 years is an unacceptable answer. We should look further and deeper. So, the response of this nursing leader saying that things have always been this way, or it's something ingrained in nursing, I think maybe missing the mark and a little short-sighted and looking at the opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm curious, just other differences as you learned, as you got your nursing education, like were there some things that jumped out at you as being, I guess, first off, similarities or parallels between, engineering thought process and the nursing thought process?
Well, they are similar. They're both based in science. And so you would think that nursing would come natural to an engineer, but it really wasn't natural for me. I actually got a D, like in dog, in my first nursing class. So it definitely is a very different type of thought process, even though they both are founded in science. Engineering is really logic-based, while in nursing, a lot of things are based on perception or gut instinct. There's a lot of assessment that happens that you end up going with your gut. So, like as an example, the patient monitor might show that the patient is doing just fine, but then when you assess the patient, you get a very different picture. So when we think about things like AI and stuff like that would be very engineering based, it doesn't pick up on a lot of subjective things that are important in nursing. Another thing is engineering is really methodical and sequenced, and we do a lot of planning as an engineer. But in nursing, we have to have a lot of flexibility to do things different than the way that they're planned. So as an example, we might be planning that we're going to give medications out to our patients at 9 a.m., just as an example. But oftentimes something happens that requires us to do something else at 9 a.m., like transport a patient for a radiology exam or clean up a patient who might have become ill, or maybe even a patient coded and we've got to work a code. So I think in nursing, it requires a lot more flexibility. So what has actually been planned isn't actually what ends up happening most of the time. Another difference that I saw was engineering kind of breaks down work into a series of tasks. That's how we analyze things, right? And do time studies. We look at a series of tasks. And we can break nursing down into tasks, but there's a lot more than just what meets the eye with a task. There's a lot of critical thinking and adjusting on the fly and kind of multitasking in nursing. So as an example, a nurse might be going to give a patient a medication, but when she's giving that medication, the engineer could be, doing a time study and thinking that it's just giving the medication. But while she's doing that, she's doing a lot of other things like assessing the patient. She might be assessing even the patient's interaction with their family or friends that might be in the room. And picking up on other things that aren't really captured in a time study. So there's just a lot else that's going on that isn't might not be visible from an engineering standpoint. And then there's even efficiency differences. Like as an engineer, I think, it would make sense that if I'm going to give 6 patients medications, why don't I go to the medication room one time, get all the medicines I need for my 6 patients, and then go give it to my patients? But from a nursing perspective, they would never do that. They would do the less efficient thing and go to the med room 6 different times and only get the medicines for one patient, because they would be worried about safety and making errors and giving the wrong patient the wrong medication. Yeah. So it's just, there's a lot of fun things between the two professions that kind of play off of each other, but they're very different thought processes and mindsets. But putting nurses with engineers is a really powerful combination because of that difference in mindset.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've as an engineer who's had the privilege of working in healthcare, I've never thought engineers alone are going to somehow come in and fix healthcare. It's partnership with nurses and pharmacists and doctors and whatever other disciplines and roles. We learn from each other and collaborate. That's awesome.
And it's fun. It's awesome when people have different perspectives. And I feel like we come up with better solutions when we do have that diversity in our thought.
Yeah. So Amanda, I'm curious one other thing. Is there something that you wish, let's say engineers like myself or managers, is there something you wish they knew or understood better about nursing?
Yeah, I know before I was a nurse, I sometimes felt like as an engineer, when I worked with nurses, I felt like they were like standoffish or maybe sometimes even difficult to work with. And I guess now that I have the nursing perspective, what I'd say is I know nurses are always wanting to do what's best for the patient. Not that engineers are not, but I guess engineers take a look at everything being broken down into a series of tasks and very analytical. But nursing is really hard to break down into that. While there are a lot of tasks, like administering a medication or providing a therapy, there's a lot of other things going on that really can't be captured as a task. And I guess when doing a time study of a nurse, you might see them doing a particular task, but there's a lot else going on, like assessing the patient or assessing a relationship with family member in the room or many other things that might be happening that you might not pick up on. So asking about those things whenever you're working with nursing, I think is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And, I'll tell you, in my experience, nursing work can be difficult to observe and do time studies on, because a lot of it is it seems to be it's not just physical work. There's mental work, and that's where I think, as we were talking about earlier, the collaboration between engineers and nursing is powerful. As an engineer, I can teach nurses how to observe work and collect data and do observation, but it's their knowledge of the work, I think, that allows them to do a far better job of kind of analyzing the work than I would be able to do as an engineer.
I think it's a partnership. I think it takes both skill sets, and I've seen or felt like the most rewarding projects I've worked on have involved the partnership between the two, just because of the different perspective or paradigm with which each operates from. Yeah.
So let's talk about, it was always fun talking about improvement work, and I was wondering, if there's an example or a story that you could tell about, some healthcare improvement work that I think is a good illustration of partnership and patient focus, and what, if you can just share something with us, please.
Sure. I kind of have two areas of passion with improvement. One of them is in quality, which I don't currently do a lot of work in this area. But when I first joined Piedmont, I did do a lot of work in this area, and something that was that I particularly enjoyed working on was Clostridium difficile infections. You might have heard of it as called C. diff, and these infections are often deadly and often hospital acquired, and happens after patients have antibiotics that kill some of the good bacteria in their gut. And one of the first projects I worked on at Piedmont was for this, and we had this multidisciplinary group, included physicians, infection prevention, nursing, just a whole gamut of folks, even finance folks. And the thing that was really exciting to me was having all those different perspectives and looking at what was currently happening and what we were doing, and coming up with some actions to try to make improvements. And we tested them on a small scale. And doing that, we achieved a 38% improvement in our infection rate just in the first 6 months of working on it. And so that was really rewarding and actually really fun work because of the diversity of the group of people that we had working on it. Not to mention, of course, the outcome that we achieved was, very positive and gratifying to know that we made such a difference in such a short period of time. We worked on it for a longer period than just the 6 months, and our ultimate goal is 0 infections, which we've gotten pretty close to, and have several months where we have 0 of these infections, where we used to have these infections routinely. So that's been really, really fun.
Before talking about construction, can we dig a little deeper into the C. diff reduction?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you can kind of set the stage. You talked about having a diverse team of people. Can you talk about what your role was and who some of the other people were that were part of that diverse team?
Yeah, so my role was mostly as project manager. And as project manager, I just tracked all the different initiatives that we were working on to try to make improvements. There was initiatives from even things like rounding on patients, all the way to things like implementing changes in EPIC, which is our electronic medical record, to changes in how and when we collect specimens. So with C. diff, there's two kinds of C. diff. There's one that's called community onset, which means the patient had it when they came here. And then there's hospital onset, which means that we caused this for the patient while they were here. And this bacteria is particularly contagious. It's not killed by regular hospital cleaners. We have to use bleach or another cleaner called oxycide. And so even down to things like testing efficacy of those different cleaners and whether those cleaners can be used on the products that we have in the hospital, like our furniture and flooring and so on. So the team members, we had an executive nursing leader. We had folks there's a group out of Duke University that helps with this particular kind of initiative, and we had folks from there. We had our chief medical information officer. We had an infection prevention or infection control doctor. We had folks from our pharmacy because as we give antibiotics, that kills this good gut bacteria and can result in these infections. So antibiotic stewardship was a really key part of this process. We had folks from the lab because of the way that this test is done. We actually, as part of the project, got some new testing equipment in that does the testing more rapidly. And so we got folks from the lab on our team from microbiology. We had folks from our infusion team because there's a treatment for this as a drug infusion. And we actually did a pilot of this type of infusion at one of our hospitals. So we had folks from there, as well as our environmental services team, because we did a lot of testing there where after a patient who had C. diff is discharged, we have to use different cleaning protocols for cleaning that room to make sure that we don't transmit that to the next patient. C. diff has a spore. It's imagine like a hard shell on it that doesn't get killed by normal cleaners. So we had folks from environmental services, and then, of course, from our infection prevention team, and then also from IT for data and reporting. So it was a pretty diverse group of team, and my role was mostly as project manager and to identify and facilitate the different improvements that we could make. And once we identified those, figuring out how to test them on a small scale and measure the results from it before we rolled it out housewide.
Yeah, so you came back there at the end. I was going to ask another follow-up question about testing ideas, and either in the context of this project or in general. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the importance of testing ideas on a small scale?
I think it's extremely important. Oftentimes in healthcare, like I've mentioned, nursing sometimes goes based on gut. And we think that one thing might cause an issue or might be the solution. However, there might not be any science to prove that, or we might be on the cutting edge of it. So by testing things on a small scale, it allows us to basically use the scientific method or PDCA before we roll it out housewide and do a whole lot of effort to roll something out. We need to prove that it actually works first. So some of the tests were simple things, like, for example, we in the emergency department, we put a sign in the bathroom that said, if you have diarrhea, that's a symptom of C. diff. If you have diarrhea, here's some specimen cups. Please leave us a specimen and put your name on the specimen cup so that we could go ahead and test for it. So just small things like that we would test and see if that made a difference in how we tested patients and how we caught these things earlier.
Yeah. And, I was taught, and I think in my experience, doing small tests of change, making it small not only helps us prove things out, but it also helps avoid big, widespread, costly mistakes, if we try something that doesn't work. And, so maybe we can shift also and talk about the work you've been doing in facility design and construction. And, first off, are there ways of doing small scale tests of change in the process of designing and constructing a facility?
It's a little harder, to be honest.
Yeah.
Most of the improvement work that we've done with the design and construction is taking away the mentality that things have to be done in sequence, that I have to sit idle until the person before me gives me some piece of information. So we've done a lot of overlapping things and working as a team and more collaboratively, instead of, for example, waiting for the design to complete and then they throw it over the fence to the construction team, and then the construction team analyzes it to figure out if it's constructible and, come up with how much it's going to cost, and then it go back to the design team because it's over budget. We kind of got rid of that kind of cycle as much as possible on the project that I'm working on now by including the construction team up front, even in our user meetings, so that the construction team hears the concern from the users. And while the design team might come up with one solution, the construction team might come up with something else. And so by us all working together, it's eliminated some of that back and forth cyclical action and taken a lot of time out of the process. And I think improved the quality of our documents and our construction by changing the nature in which we work.
So is the work, can you talk a little bit more about the expansion project at Piedmont Healthcare, and, what's driving that, and, what's some of the approach here? You mentioned before having a lot of staff and patients involved. Can you kind of talk about it? Again, first off, why the expansion, and two, why taking a different approach that engages people?
Sure. So the expansion is desperately needed. We are beyond capacity 80% of weekdays. Today, as an example, we are on complete diversion. We have more patients than we have places to put patients. And so that was one of the reasons driving the expansion. We're also located in Atlanta, and our population is growing much more rapidly than the use rate of hospitals is declining. So we all know that the use rate of inpatient beds is declining, and people are trying to get more care in an outpatient setting. So we got a lot of questions about, well, why are you adding beds? Well, it's because the demographic, the age 65 plus demographic, is growing faster than the rate at which the inpatient beds use is declining. And then we have some infrastructure opportunities on our campus too. About 40% of our buildings will be beyond the end of their useful life by the year 2021 without this tower. And so that's a significant portion of our campus. It was originally, we moved to this campus in the 1950s. And so we just have some aging infrastructure. And then we have many destination service lines here. Piedmont Atlanta is the most acute community hospital in the country, which means that the sickness of our patients, it's measured by something called case mix index. It's the highest of any community hospital in the nation. And so a lot of people come here for these specialty services, and we wanted to offer a different experience for our patients and visitors, as well as our staff. We need to be able to attract top talent to be able to deliver this high level of care, and wanted to offer a different experience. So that's some of the why behind it. As far as including many viewpoints, one of the challenges in design is you can imagine that building a 1 million square foot building from the time that we started design back in early 2016 until the time we opened the doors in late 2020, many years go by and a lot changes, including the people that work here. And so one of the important things in design is to mitigate personal preferences. So I might have a personal preference for something, but it be incongruent with the standard way of doing things. So one way to mitigate that is to involve a whole lot of users or participants in the design, so that we have multiple perspectives. Another thing that helps do is none of us can predict the future. And so since the building will open for, 4 years after we designed it, we want to make sure that we're thinking about what could happen in the future and design it to be as flexible as possible if there are changes. So just to give a few examples of that, things like instead of installing like fixed cabinetry, which locks us into exactly where someone's going to work or where supplies are going to go, we try to have things mobile. And that allows us to change, like, for example, supply rooms on an inpatient floor. It allows us to change the layout so that if we go from organizing our supplies based on service line, like here's all the GI supplies and here's urology and so on, and we instead want to organize them by type of supply, like here's all of your catheters, here's all of your bathing supplies and so on, we can make those changes on the fly without any construction in our supply rooms. Some of the other ones that we did were in high-end procedure areas. So thinking about things like cath labs and operating rooms that are for heart or hybrid operating rooms. We involved physicians from many different disciplines in the design of those so that we made sure that they accommodated all of the different types of things that we might like to do in there. So as an example there, the hybrid operating rooms are used both by our structural heart invasive cardiologists as well as our peripheral vascular physicians. And the setup of the room is slightly different, depending on what kind of procedure you're wanting to do. But we wanted to be able to do both of those kind of things in that room. And so including both of those types of physicians in the design allowed for more flexibility in how we use that room and optimizes the use of it so that it's not sitting idle, whenever, if peripheral vascular only works on Mondays, it doesn't sit idle Tuesday through Friday. So there was a lot of that in the design. Mm-hmm. And then we included a lot of other like community members. We have a neighborhood advisory council. So there's a lot of residential neighborhoods around us. And it was really important to us to be a community asset. So we included them in our design as well, especially of the public spaces. So what would be offered for them, like our auditorium where they can host their neighborhood meetings, and our outdoor plaza where there could be Saturday morning farmers markets or yoga, as well as our restaurant and coffee shop, which would be community amenities that these residential neighbors could walk to. So it was really important to us to get their perspective as well. And then, of course, I mentioned the patients. Really at the center of it is the patient. And we had over 500 patients involved in our design and giving us feedback and helping us understand what's important to them. Many of us have been patients, but hearing firsthand from the patients what's important to them and making sure we incorporated that into our design and really centered our design around that was really key for us.
Yeah, because I imagine you talk about personal preference for staff. There might also be, personal preference for patients, and so likewise, it's important to get many voices of the customer, if you will.
Yes, and so to do that, we kind of took this approach where we wanted to identify what was most important to them. And the number one thing that was most important to our patients was access to our clinicians, like, your nurse or your physician. But the surprising one was the number two most important thing to our patients was they were concerned about their family members or their visitors that were there to see them and making sure that those family members were taken care of. And we knew that was important, but we didn't realize it was the second highest priority for our patients. So we actually did the design of our patient rooms to be larger and have a whole dedicated area for the family, because the patient then knows that the family member is okay if the family member is right there. And we also changed our policies for allowing family members to use things like the patient bathroom and shower instead of having to go to a guest center for those things, because it keeps the family at the bedside, which makes the patient more comfortable in knowing that their family members cared for. So there was some key little snippets that came from that that really strongly influenced our design.
Yeah. One other question I ask is somebody asked me the other day, and I'm not involved enough in facility planning and construction. You said it's hard to predict the future, and you've already addressed this a little bit by talking about flexibility, but What methods do you use to try to forecast? You've got population growth, you have aging population. There's also other trends of healthcare relying less on inpatient stays. What are some of the forecasting tools, or is there some sort of modeling that's done to look at different scenarios?
There is. So there's several different software programs out there that do analysis based on the census. And then there's also, of course, information where like the number of people moving to an area and the demographics of those people. And if we collect that demographic information, we know that based on that demographic information, what type of services these folks are likely to need. So as one example, we do a lot of heart-related things at Piedmont Atlanta. And one example is that we're in the South. The South is known for our delicious Southern food, often fried. And we all know that butter-laden and fried food contributes to heart disease and obesity. And so knowing that population is, the population that we serve, we wanted to make sure that we offer those services that the folks are going to need. Each area, the demographics are different and what folks need is different. Another thing that happens is with all of that kind of Southern food and Southern lifestyle, and I'm making generalizations. I'm from the South myself, and I would like to believe that I don't, do these things. But it also, like, stroke is a really common thing. So we want to make sure that we have all of the proper technology to be able to care for the patients that are in our community as a community hospital. So we analyze all those demographics, and then there are use rates by each demographic group. And so we use that to then forecast volumes of patients. And the volumes will be usually by service line. There's use rates, for each different type of service, like oncology or orthopedics and so on, broken down by demographic group. And then we forecast that, and we then apply some capacity statistics. So most hospitals like to operate around 75% capacity. That's kind of the sweet spot usually. And so we can forecast out those volumes and then back out that capacity factor to allow us time to, maintain rooms and turn them over and all that stuff. And that gives us what's called key planning units, which are the key drivers for what goes in the building. So examples of key planning units are things like operating rooms, cath labs, number of beds. And then from there, we can create what I call the ingredient list. It's known in facility design as a space program, which lists out every single space that goes into a building. So it's, if you think of a recipe, it has the ingredient list of, how much chicken you need and cheese and whatever other things. This is the same for a building, and it lists out like how many toilets, how many offices, how many supply rooms, all the different things we need and how big each of those needs to be. And then from there, we start doing what's called a test fit. So kind of laying it out on a floor plan and trying to fit it onto a floor plate or within the structure of a building. So it's a really cool process. It's a lot of fun to work through.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask, in the spirit of practicing lean, and this is something I shared a little bit about when I talked at the Society for Health Systems conference last year, and in the spirit of the book Practicing Lean, where a number of us kind of shared stories looking back. I mean, can you think of a situation, kind of early in your career, something that you would have handled differently today, knowing what you know now?
Oh gosh, I don't think that there's anything I've worked on that I wouldn't change or see an opportunity for making improvement to. I guess one thing early in my career, when I worked at that first hospital and revenue cycle that I mentioned earlier, the hospital system was building a new hospital, and the executive who was responsible for that had graduated from the same program I had at Georgia Tech. And I thought this new hospital thing was going to be really cool. And I asked her for the opportunity to be involved in figuring out how this new hospital would work with the existing hospital. They were about a 15-minute drive apart, and the new one wouldn't have all of the support services that the existing kind of main campus would have. and she afforded me that opportunity, even though it was well outside of the realm of what I probably should have been working on. And so I facilitated these work groups to map out the processes for everything, like from how we were going to transfer patients to supply chain to revenue cycle. It was across the board. And I look back, and when I did this, I spent an ungodly amount of time trying to make these maps really pretty in the computer. Mm-hmm. And that was really all waste. I think now if I was to do that again, which I actually do it now for a living, I definitely would not waste my time on making things pretty. That's not what's important. I think I would have mapped the processes instead using things like the sticky notes on butcher paper, or even using whiteboards and so on, and not really focus on the prettiness of them, but the functionality of them and the information in there. So I think I've come a ways with that, but every single thing I've ever worked on, I can think of a way that I would have done it better. Yeah. I think that's just the curse of being an engineer, right?
I was just going to say the same thing, the curse of a continuous improvement mindset, but it's good to reflect and share on things like that. And, you ended up giving, some advice to others, but maybe others need to, kind of sometimes learn on their own. They're like, but no, it's not too hard to make them pretty. And then maybe they'll come to that same conclusion themselves.
There's just and to think of it as waste. I mean, it is waste, because like, what value is being provided in making that look pretty? Yeah. Really none.
Well, I'll tell you, then there's the tough situation where sometimes as an outside consultant, this is going back a ways, the client has asked for these things to be made pretty. And so now there's the conflict where I think it's waste, but the client, this is where, the lean concept of value being defined by the customer. I had to just kind of just suck it up and make it pretty. I tried to make the case that maybe we don't need to do that, but in that case, the voice of the customer won out. But do you have another piece of advice that you would want to share, for young industrial engineers, young society, for health systems members? What advice do you have for people who want to work in healthcare? Maybe other than, I've already said it, join the Society for Health Systems.
Yeah. I love healthcare. I think it's the most rewarding career path anyone could possibly take. We all need it. The industry affords the opportunity for us to make a positive difference for other people every day. And I can't imagine anything more gratifying or rewarding. And it really inspires me, but it's a responsibility. I believe healthcare needs more industrial engineers, but I consistently find it's really difficult for folks to break into the industry. A lot of the jobs for IEs in healthcare, I know IEs, when they graduate, they'll start looking for jobs that have the title industrial engineer. There's pretty much none of those in healthcare. I've never held that title, and I've never seen a job with that title in healthcare. So I guess my recommendation would be to look for analyst type positions, or positions that have words that reflect what an industrial engineer does, and don't just, search for industrial engineer, and think beyond, just typical industrial engineering. That's a huge skill set as an engineer, and think beyond that and how your skill set can contribute to whatever position you see posted. And just use that to get your foot in the door, and then from there, prove your value, and you'll take off. But I think it's really hard to break in, and that would be my advice for how to go about breaking into it.
Okay. If you had a magic wand, what's one thing you would change about hospitals if you could wave that?
Maybe the reverse of that is the better question. I don't think there's anything I would not change. Maybe there's one thing I wouldn't change. Maybe I wouldn't change the compassionate nature of all the people who choose healthcare as a profession. That's probably about the only thing I would keep the same. Other than that, I think just about everything in healthcare and in our healthcare system has a huge opportunity to be changed and improved. Our system's really broken, and I would change just about everything.
Well, where would you start? I'm going to still try to pin you down on one thing. Now, it's not that you could only change one thing. What's the first thing you would change? I
think a lot of things are driven by our payment model, and I don't want to get into political beliefs or any of that, but I think our payment model is driving a lot of how things work. And it also drives a lot of how people and what care people receive. And so maybe starting with the payment model might be, that would certainly, if we change that, that would certainly be a gigantic domino to change a whole lot of other things within our system.
Yeah. And I don't think that's strictly even a political discussion. If we're looking at it, I assume you're talking about kind of the predominant fee for service model as opposed to value-based purchasing or other models that people have been trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the perfect model is, I guess, is the challenge. So it's easy for me to say change the payment model, but I hate it when people, suggest something like that and then they don't have a solution. So I'm a little hesitant to say that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's easier diagnosing the problem than it is to come up with good countermeasures, and maybe we can come up with something that's better if perfect doesn't exist, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, and a final question. We've mentioned the Society for Health Systems again, but I love the organization and I appreciate your involvement in the leadership. What do you like most? And there's probably more than one thing. I keep asking these limiting questions. What do you like about your involvement in the Society for Health Systems?
Well, I consider the Society for Health Systems my home, my professional home. If you looked at one professional society that I would most affiliate with, SHS is definitely that. I feel like they're kind of my people. I'm really comfortable with these people. I love the different types of folks we have. We have engineers, we have clinicians like nurses and physicians. We have performance improvement folks like lean green belts and black belts and Six Sigma trained folks. We have administrators and then just many other types of roles. And so that variety of type of person that's in SHS is something I enjoy. I really also like SHS people because they share their learnings. They don't when they figure something out, they're not eager to keep it to themselves. They're eager to share it with everybody else and help everyone else with solving those problems and making that impact in their healthcare community. Yeah. And we all know that as we share, it's improving, one of the most vital parts of our society, which is delivery of healthcare. And then I like also the variety of the type of work that these people do. So when you go to the conference, some people are talking about supply chain. I'll be there talking about construction. Other people are talking about quality improvement, throughput. There's just a real diverse set of skill that this improvement professional can contribute to. And I think probably one of my most favorite things is the social interaction. Just feeling like that there's a network out there that I can bounce things off of and get guidance and advice and, just having that network, I think is a key thing. It just makes me feel at home and supported. Mm-hmm.
Great reasons to be involved. And I feel the same way. So I would encourage people, just go search for Society for Health Systems online. So Amanda, thank you so much for taking time to share with us today. Your unique combination of perspectives as an engineer and a nurse, and I wish you the best with the new expansion project that you're doing there at Piedmont Healthcare. Thank you so much. And as part of our continued networking through SHS, I hope we'll talk again soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure and appreciate the opportunity to work with you, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.